You're watching France 24. I'm Mark Owen. This is the headline this hour. The only surviving terrorist from the Paris terror atrocity of 2015 briefly broke his silence in court. Salah Abdeslam only spoke to say he's a soldier of the Islamic State group. The trial of Abdeslam and 19 other alleged accomplices got underway in Paris this Wednesday. Thank you very much for being with us. The trial of the only surviving member of the terror cell that attacked Paris in 2015 has begun this Wednesday. Salah Abdeslam and 19 alleged accomplices are facing life in prison for their part in the killing of 130 people on the night of November the 13th, 2015. Salah Abdeslam fled Paris on that night, abandoning his explosive suicide vest in a street dustbin. He was arrested in Brussels some 4 months later. Well, Salah Abdeslam hasn't cooperated with the investigation and today only broke his silence to confirm his name and to say that he's a soldier of the Islamic State group. In this special programme, we'll be re-examining the effect of this terror attack on French life and on a wider scale across Europe and indeed the world. Starting with the trial, our reporter there is Claire Pacquiao. She's covering it for us. Good evening to you, Claire. Claire, at the trial there in Paris. Armand Georgian is our international affairs editor here in the studio. Armand, to provide a wider analysis on the international front. Armand, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Mark.
On the other side of our studio, William Juliet, criminal lawyer here in Paris, specialising in human rights. William, thank you for joining us too.
Hello.
The attacks were meticulously planned and researched. They were carried out with cold-blooded precision, beginning at the Stade de France, where 3 terrorists detonated their suicide vests outside the stadium, where President FrancoisHollande was watching France face Germany in a football match. Then in Paris, a series of atrocities claimed the lives of people enjoying their Friday night out. 6 bars and terraces were sprayed with automatic gunfire. Then came the attack that came to represent the depth of depravity of this terror cell. 3 armed men turning their weapons on a packed rock gig at the Bataclan concert hall. By the end of this fateful night, 130 innocent people had been killed. Here at France 24, Nick Rushworth now looks back at this.
Two suicide bombers blew themselves up outside France's national stadium within 10 minutes of each other on the 13th of November 2015. A third suicide attack took place less than half an hour later. It was 9:30 p.m. A night of horror had begun. President FrancoisHollande, who was in the stadium attending a friendly match with Germany, was taken into safety. Attacks were also taking place in the centre of the French capital. Gunmen opened fire on a café and restaurant in the Rue Alibert in the 10th arrondissement, and then on the Rue de la Fontaine au Roi and Rue de Charonne in the 11th, areas known for their nightlife. Dozens of people were killed.
Il y avait du sang partout, les gens sont tombés comme des mouches. C'était une vraie scène de guerre. J'avais l'impression d'être dans les tranchées.
The biggest attack of the evening began at 9:49 p.m. when 3 terrorists burst into the Bataclan concert hall and opened fire with automatic weapons. They were targeting 1,500 people attending a rock concert. A journalist for Le Monde who lived next door filmed some of the concertgoers escaping via a back door and others hanging from windows desperately trying to get free. Some of those stuck inside hid in groups where they could. 2 police officers arrived and killed one of the terrorists on the ground floor. The 2 others were upstairs. They had taken hostages. French police special forces moved in at that point. They secured the ground floor. Survivors filed out.
On était tous allongés et là j'ai vu qu'en fait ils tiraient de partout et donc là c'est l'instinct de survie où on est tous au sol, on bouge pas, on voudrait rentrer dans le sol pour pas qu'on nous voie.
Les uns sur les autres recroquevillés à entendre tous les coups de Kalachnikov, les gens comme si les gens se faisaient torturer, les gens avaient mal parce que se faisaient tirer dessus. C'était une boucherie, c'était un carnage, des gens morts partout et voilà.
The French president spoke to the nation just before midnight.
Mes chers compatriotes, au moment où je m'exprime, des attaques terroristes d'une ampleur sans précédent sont en cours dans l'agglomération parisienne. Il y a plusieurs dizaines de tués. Il y a beaucoup de blessés. C'est une horreur.
French forces at the Bataclan concert hall stormed the two terrorists after trying to negotiate with them. The operation ended 21 minutes after midnight after 3 hours of bloodshed. They were the deadliest attacks in France since the Second World War.
The night of November the 13th, 2015, remembered there in that report. Nick Rushworth with that. Let's bring in France 24's Claire Pacquiao. She's covering the trial which began this Wednesday. Claire, welcome back into the programme. This is an historic moment, clearly, a trial like no other. Clearly many special preparations and conditions in which this trial will take place.
Absolutely. This is colossal. It's just the magnitude. It's hard to imagine, Mark, but let me just paint you a picture. The case consists of 542 volumes. That basically means stacks of paperwork, each 20 centimetres thick. So that is the amount of material that consists of this case. It is just enormous. 1,800 civil plaintiffs. So these are victims, people who either survived the attacks or family members who lost loved ones or whose loved ones were injured. They have filed civil lawsuits, and in France their role in this criminal trial is actually really quite significant, more so than in many other countries. The civil plaintiffs really do have a role to play in this criminal trial. So the organisation has been huge. Not all of the civil plaintiffs came today. Some will come only on days when they feel that it's important to them, whether it's particularly relevant to their particular case, and others will be listening from home. There's a web radio system that's been put in place so that they can be in their homes or even in their workplaces and just tune in and listen to the proceedings. And they'll also be able to benefit from psychological support. There's a hotline that they can call up whenever they want and get a little bit of support if they feel they need it.
Claire Pacquiao, for now, thank you very much indeed. We'll be going back to Claire in a few moments. Let's take a closer look now at the 20 men facing life in prison for their alleged roles in the November 2015 Paris terror attack.
20 people face charges for their involvement in the November 13th terror attacks of 6 years ago, in a major trial expected to last until next May. 14 of the accused are appearing at this specially built facility at Paris's High Court, including the only surviving gunman from that evening, Salah Abdeslam. The other men, aged between 28 and 39, include Mohamed Abrini, nicknamed the Man in the Hat, who's suspected of being involved in financing the operation. Abrini is believed to have returned to Belgium following those attacks, where he was linked to the suicide bombings at Brussels airport in March 2016. 11 of the defendants are facing various terrorism charges, including participation in a criminal terrorist organization, conspiracy to commit murder, complicity in attempted murder, complicity in false imprisonment, and complicity in attempted murder of individuals holding posts of public authority. 3 other men currently under judicial supervision are accused of aiding Salah Abdeslam to flee the scene. 6 men are being tried in absentia, among them Fabien and Jean-Michel Klein, 2 brothers who were members of the Islamic State group and had claimed responsibility for the attacks in Paris. They're reported to have died in Syria or Iraq. Oussama Attar is believed to have met the same fate. He's thought to be one of the orchestrators of the coordinated attacks. He's being charged with directing a terrorist organization. Yet, with no concrete evidence of their demise, the French justice system includes them among the defendants, all of whom could face sentences of between 20 years and life in prison if found guilty.
Let's go back to Claire Pacquiao, who's covering this case for us. Claire, of course, at the Palais de Justice in the centre of Paris. Claire, Salah Abdeslam, the only surviving member of the terror cell that struck Paris, is in court. He's remained silent since his arrest in March 2016. Today he spoke briefly. Tell us about that.
Well, he spoke for the first time when the leading judge was going through formalities, asking for his name, date of birth, confirm his parents' names, confirm where he lived. The judge also asked him what his profession had been before he had been arrested, and he said that he had given up any professions and had become a fighter or a soldier for the Islamic State. Now, that was the outburst that we had earlier on this afternoon. Now, just very recently, we've had another outburst, this time even more aggressive. He said that he had been treated like a dog for the last 6 years, and that the only reason he hadn't complained was because after he dies, he will be resurrected, or presumably he means he'll go to paradise. Now, this outburst was really too much for some of the victims, people who lived through the attacks or who lost loved ones who were in the courtroom. And the leading judge is going to have to work particularly hard now to try and gain a bit of authority inside the courtroom. I was just speaking to a lawyer who's representing some civil plaintiffs, some victims, and he said that this was a bit too much and the aggressiveness was really over the mark, and that something is going to have to change. We can't have this kind of aggressiveness going on throughout the trial.
So Salah Abdeslam, having spoken now twice in a very terse manner, no sign of any real explanation about why and how this all happened coming from him. Claire, can you tell us about the other defendants there, the other people who are in the dock alongside him?
So altogether, including Salah Abdeslam, there are 20 defendants. Two of them are accused of having supposed to have been part of the group of attackers, but they ended up not making it on the night for various different reasons. 6 are being tried on abstentia. 1 is actually imprisoned at the moment in Turkey. The 5 others are believed to be dead in Iraq or Syria. We have 6 men who are accused of having helped Salah Abdeslam escape back from Paris to Belgium and then hide for 4 months before he was arrested by police. And the 5 others are accused of having helped him and the other group of attackers to prepare the attack. So we actually saw one of them a little earlier on this afternoon. He's accused of having supplied the attackers with false identity paperwork. He had a kind of difficult moment in court. He almost fainted and the proceedings had to be suspended for a few minutes. They have now started again. He's back in court, but certainly 20 people who are on trial today, but only 14 actually physically in the courtroom.
Pacquiao at the Palais de Justice in Paris. Thank you very much indeed. Let's bring in for a first comment our guest, William Juliet, criminal and human rights lawyer here in the studio. William, thank you for being with us. We heard from Claire Pacquiao there at the trial that Salah Abdeslam has finally spoken, declaring himself to be a soldier of the Islamic State group, and obviously then sounding off and saying he was being treated like a dog while he's been held in custody. What effect will this have, do you think, on what we're going to see next? The fact that he's taking this kind of aggressive line, complaining about his conditions, but not revealing anything really about what's going on and getting nowhere near the kind of answers that people want to have.
I'm not sure it's going to have any effect because it's not a surprise. He's not been, he has not been saying anything from day one, and he has been complaining about what was happening to him in custody. He always has. So I think that the course of justice will carry on without him, and I think nobody was expecting anything else. The president of the court, who is a very experienced judge, Jean-Louis Perriès, he used to be an investigating judge in the serious organized crime unit at the Paris court, and he dealt with a lot of criminals, and he knows how he's going to deal with this case. He's been working on it for more than a year, I think. There's more than 1 million pages in the bundles. And he said 2 things as an introduction. 1, this is a historical moment. And 2, this is a criminal court. And the court is going to deal with this criminal case as it deals with any other criminal case. Meaning that lawyers are going to do what they've got to do on the defense side, and the partie civile are going to speak for the victims, and justice is going to be dealt with as it should.
And justice is done, and that's the important thing that needs to be done correctly, following all the procedures. William, more from you in a moment, and more from Armand Georgian, who's here with us after this next report. There are many questions that the families of the victims would like answered. There's little hope, though, as the trial starts, that we'll get anything like a real or proper explanation from why the atrocity was planned and carried out. As we've just heard from Salah Abdeslam speaking in court, revealing very little except that he is working for the Islamic State group. Here at France 24, Delana de Souza with this report.
Terror attack in France since World War II have initially been larger in scope. In March 2016, Belgian police made a crucial discovery when they picked up a terrorist's laptop from a Brussels garbage bin. From it, they were able to recover plans of the attacks. The 3 separate incidents carried out in Paris each had their own code name. The group, which killed 39 people at bars and cafes, were known as Group Omar. Group French targeted the Bataclan concert hall, killing 90, and Group Iraq claimed the life of 1 person at the Stade de France. 2 additional incidents, which were never carried out, also appeared on the laptop. A group nicknamed Metro suggested a possible 4th attack on the Paris Metro on November 13th, as well as one on Amsterdam Schiphol Airport. What happened to these 2 plots and why weren't they carried out? After a lengthy investigation, questions remain over where the terrorists sourced the ammunition. Doubts also remain over the role played by Mohamed Abrini. He left the Paris suburb where some of the terrorists had been preparing on the eve of the November attacks. 4 months later, he was spotted at Brussels airport shortly before twin blasts claimed the lives of 32 people. Abrini, dubbed the Man in the Hat, fled the premises without detonating his suitcase bomb. While he is currently on trial in Paris, so is the lone survivor of the group which carried out the November attacks, Salah Abdeslam. Prosecutors will try to determine how he made it out alive after his suicide vest was found abandoned at a suburb in Paris.
This is our special programme on the opening of the trial of Salah Abdeslam and 19 other alleged accomplices, all connected with the November 2015 terror attacks on Paris. Joining me for this programme, we have Claire Pacquiao, who is our reporter at the Palais de Justice. Here in the studio, 2 guests, William Juliet, criminal and human rights lawyer, and Armand Georgian, our international affairs editor. Armand, can I bring you in at this point? Is there any sense, do you think, that the kind of clarification victims' families are seeking is going to actually emerge from this trial?
I think, as William said, that's unlikely when it comes to Salah Abdeslam, because from his behaviour, it's obvious that he sees himself as this sort of symbolic figure in the Islamic State group to this day, and he's not going to come down from that pedestal, so to speak. Hence, you know, these comments about only Allah can judge me and so forth. So I don't think we can expect anything from him in terms of suddenly recognising the court or anything like that. What happens with the other defendants obviously is perhaps a more interesting question, and that might afford those present, you know, victims and their families some more information. But I think it's clear from all the various guests that we've interviewed that in the course of the day, you know, families and representatives of victims' families and so forth, that they simply want justice to be done. They don't really expect anything in particular from these defendants, certainly not in terms of repentance or emotional closure. All that obviously that's a whole other dimension, a whole other realm. But obviously they do want justice to be done, and a lot of them have said we want to be able to show that democracy works, that not revenge but a judicial process leading to convictions, and that's obviously what they want to see.
And William, in terms of how this trial will go, I mean, clearly if the defendants aren't cooperating, aren't contributing, clearly that makes the system look less fair, doesn't it?
Yes and no. First of all, I'm not sure that they will all go the same way than Salah Abdeslam. I'm not sure they all accept the idea that they are going to be sentenced, if they are, to something like life in prison, which is where he's going, obviously. I'm not sure all will not have listened to their lawyers, because he has, what I understood, been struggling with his legal team. Some were on, and then they said they were quitting. I know a couple of defense lawyers were dealing with some other of the accused, and they are very bright and good defense lawyers and good men. And I have some hope that maybe the lawyers also will bring something out of some of these accused. I'm not so pessimistic.
You say they're good men.
You
say they're good men. Can I just put the question that maybe sort of everybody travelling on the metro, travelling on the bus, or standing at any?
I was talking about the lawyers I know.
Oh, no, the lawyers. It's the lawyers I'm talking about. It's good men. I mean, good men. I mean, they have a dilemma. How can they defend people who perhaps have admitted to their role in this atrocity?
Because let's see what happens, but maybe they manage to build some kind of relationship with these individuals, and maybe something is going to come out.
Okay.
We'll see, but the door's not completely closed, and it's going to stay open for roughly 8 months. And I do trust also Jean-Louis Perriès. I said a word about him. He's also very bright, experienced and good man. And I do have hope that maybe he will bring something out of these people.
William, thank you. Let's go to Claire Pacquiao, who for the next, foreseeable is going to be at the Palais de Justice covering this case for us. Claire, welcome back into the programme. You've been speaking to some of the people there around you. Tell us the type of things that you've picked up on today in court.
Well, when we arrived this morning, I spoke to some victims, so people who either survived the attacks or lost loved ones. And they told me that they were feeling quite prepared, actually, for the day. They knew this day was coming. Many of them have benefited from psychological support from various different associations which have been set up since the attacks. They've learned about the judicial system. They know just about how the proceedings are going to unfold. That was this morning. This evening, actually, just about 20 minutes ago, I spoke to a man who survived the Bataclan massacre. He hid under a dead body in order not to be seen by the terrorists, and he said it was just much harder than he had expected. He told me that he was a marathon runner, and yet today was just more exhausting physically but emotionally than anything he had had to do before. And of course, this is going to go on until May. So really, many of these victims are now saying after this first day that they're going to need as much strength as they have to get through it.
Claire Pacquiao at the Palais de Justice, thank you very much indeed. Now, as we heard a little earlier, the President of France at the time, FrancoisHollande, was at the Stade de France when the attacks began. Today, he confirmed that he will give testimony at the trial.
I will answer all questions that are asked, notably about the international situation, what was happening in Syria and Iraq, what were France's actions, why it launched operations against Islamist terrorists in this region, as it did previously in the Sahel. I will answer any questions about my decisions during that terrible night. I will answer any questions, if they are asked, about what our intelligence was.
FrancoisHollande was at the Stade de France. It's worth remembering there were 3 suicide bombs detonated outside the stadium. Here in the studio, William Juliet, criminal and human rights lawyer, and Armand Georgian, our international affairs editor. Gentlemen, can we broaden it out a bit more to talk about sort of the new terror threat that France might be facing? Since 2015, Armand, things have developed and changed in terms of how terror attacks have been planned and how they've taken place. With the events that have unfolded in Afghanistan recently, is there a sense that the nature of the terror threat is now evolving, changing?
Well, the terror threat remains very high, according to the French Interior Minister. He spoke on French radio this morning. He said that 5 attacks had been foiled this year, and that overall, since Emmanuel Macron had become president, he said that there were a total of 50 attacks, 36 of which were foiled, he said, but 14, unfortunately, were committed. There have been reforms, of course, an attempt to learn from the intelligence failures of November 2015. A lot more intelligence officers have been recruited. There was something called the Cazeneuve Protocol that was signed, named after the former Interior Minister, which is a bilateral police accord between Turkey and France, which is also underpinned by better information sharing. So all of the, and of course at the European level, because the parliamentary inquiry in France found a lot of failures, but particularly at the EU level of miscommunications and so forth between the Belgians, the French, the Turks, and so forth. So there have been quite a few attempts to try and change all this, Mark, but it's very hard to know whether such an atrocity could be avoided today, for the simple reason that this happened when the Islamic State group was at its height in 2014 and 2015. It had a kind of, quote, prestige because an ability to recruit a lot of people, because it was seen by would-be jihadists as the go-to terrorist organization. And that is no longer the case. It doesn't have that territory. Yes, it does have some, it does have activities in Afghanistan. There's an enclave along the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan where it's said to have training camps and so forth, but it's not, at the moment, yet the kind of large territory that existed in Iraq and Syria at the time when the Bataclan and the Paris attacks happened. So I think it's very hard to say for that reason whether, all these changes and police reforms and intelligence things would make a difference. You can't really test that.
Armin, William, need to pause you there. Let's take a look at our next report. There are some 1,300 civil parties, 300 lawyers involved in this trial. 150 journalists are accredited. Those who aren't will observe on screens nearby. Behind these statistics, though, human stories. We met Jean-Pierre Albertini, one of the plaintiffs and father of one of the victims. He spoke to our reporter Erica Olivaria.
Moi, j'attends mon passage, j'attends le dernier virage. Je bois sans t'oublier, je bois pour m'oublier. Je veux garder ton image comme une fusée dans les nuages. Voilà.
A father reading the lyrics of a song dedicated to his son Stéphane. He was murdered at the age of 39 during the Bataclan attacks. The lyrics were written by the musician Captain Boogie. He too was at the concert hall on the evening of the 13th of November 2015. And was one of the last people to see Stéphane alive. Jean-Pierre included the lyrics of the song in his book, which he wrote to try and find answers to the tragedy, for himself, as well as for his 10-year-old grandson, Stéphane's child.
Il sait que son père est mort, mais il sait rien, c'est assez compliqué à expliquer. Mais si un jour il pose des questions, il aura un document qui permet de comprendre un peu le contexte.
At first, Jean-Pierre was reluctant to join the trial as a civil party, but he then decided to do so.
Que les accusés prennent 20 ans, 30 ans ou perpétuité, ça ne changera pas notre quotidien et ça ne fera pas revenir Stéphane. Mais il y a quand même un deuxième enjeu qui résulte quand même de l'instruction, qui va démontrer les rouages de ce carnage, quelles sont les personnes qui, à l'étranger, ont développé l'idéologie mortifère. Ça permettra, outre de comprendre ce qui s'est passé cette fois-là, mais bien sûr d'éviter que ça se reproduise.
8 months after the tragic November night in Paris, another terrorist attack took place in the southern city of Nice, where Jean-Pierre now lives for part of the year. He lives close to the Promenade des Anglais, where the rampage took place, and it is here that he participates in group discussions with other victims.
Heartbreaking story. Final comment in this slice of the programme from William Juliet, criminal rights and criminal and human rights lawyer. How important, William, is it that justice is seen to be done cleanly and fairly?
Very important, and I think this is what's going to happen. Just kicking back to what you pointed a minute ago at police, intelligence officers, President of the French Republic at the time, François-Hollande, all these people are going to explain what went wrong also and why we could not prevent these events. A lot of guys were under red notices, arrest warrants, and we didn't manage to stop them coming back in our country. And I think all that is going to be supervised, is going to be questioned by the lawyers, the court, and this will also help justice to be done.
William, thank you very much indeed. Armin, thank you, and thanks to Claire as well. We'd like now to pay tribute to our own colleague who was killed at the Bataclan. Mathieu Hoche was a much-loved member of our technical team that keeps France 24 on air. That night, he left work 9 p.m. to go to the Eagles of Death metal gig that was taking place at the Bataclan. Mathieu was shot by one of the terrorists inside the venue. Our thoughts are with his many friends and family, and we remember Mathieu Osh, one of our own, killed on November the 13th, 2015. For more, stay with us. You're watching France 24.